This is the CW Spiral, a podcast run by three survivors of the CW's calling in 2022. We're your hosts, Sabrina Reed,
Michael Patterson,
and Reed Gaudens.
bringing you history about the network and the WB, the latest news and in-depth Sporterville discussions of the best and messiest shows to ever grace the small screen. Okay, just so y'all know, we are abandoning the CW for this pod episode, but that is okay. Also, Michael is not with us, but he will be on next pod. We're actually going to talk about music. It's something we nerd out together about a lot, but y'all don't know
Yes.
that. So
We've
now
been
you can
planning
know.
this episode for a very long time.
And finally we get to do it. Reed, I feel like we should start with like what we're listening to now.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm in a music rut because I'm like, it's the beginning of the year. Stuff hasn't really come out yet. Like the new stuff is still trying to it's not that time yet. So I feel like what I've been listening to for the past year, maybe the whole world too, is just Taylor Swift. But I do love I think my favorite song that's out right now that came out last year is Greedy by Tate McRae.
Mhm.
So good. X's too. She's so good.
She is actually, she's part of the reason why I now have an upbeat mix on Spotify. Like, you know, I am very like alternative and like it's a lot of instrumental music too. So when the upbeat mix popped up, I was like, oh, is that because of Tate? But I think it's because of I think it's like because of Tate. And I've been listening to Troye Sivan a lot too.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
I had revisited Renaissance as well. Like Cozy is being played a lot, so it was Church Girl and Virgo's Groove.
Ooh.
So I think that's what's
That's like
happening.
the holy trinity of that album, I feel like.
Yes. But like, okay, so I'm not, I guess what I'm listening to besides my upbeat mix is I've been listening to like lo-fi beats and instrumental during work because it's easy to concentrate. And
hmm
then my usual staples, which is Paramore, Fall Out Boy, a little bit of States Champs, and Charlotte Sands.
I mean, that's the classics.
Yes, I mean you can't go wrong with the first Paramore album, right? Like you really
Yeah.
can't. I really enjoy them.
That was our teenhood.
It was. It definitely was.
Yeah, we lived through that.
That was me navigating when exactly I could blast that album from my it's not a boombox. What is it? Stereo. From my
Yeah.
stereo when no one else was in the house.
I have a visceral memory of my freshman year of high school. For whatever reason, they were playing music in the cafeteria during lunch. Like, I'm not
Nice.
talking about just like over the loudspeaker. Like, they had speakers, and I was like, what is? I don't remember. To this day, I don't remember why, but I remember hearing two songs vividly, and it was "Misery Business" by Paramore and "Bubbly" by Colby Calais. Like that just screams 2007.
It does, but it's also like those are two different sides of the music spectrum.
Yeah, the mix was mixing, I'll say that.
But like Bubbly is also a classic. Isn't that the song they played over oh, what is that Canyon romance coming to Netflix?
Canadian?
No, Canyon, the Western thing
Oh,
that
I was like Canadian romance. Oh, Ransom Canyon?
Okay, yes, the Deadline, I believe it was Deadline, played Bubbly over top of their post for
Really?
yeah, and I was like, ooh, I was singing it. I was like, this if this is what the show is about, I'll be tuned in.
Yeah. And now I needed that song to be in
I hope
it.
so. I mean, I hope they license it because it I feel like it would fit. Everyone needs a good low stakes romance to tune into.
Yeah. And I feel like now that we're talking about music and the TV overlap, I feel like that's kind of fostered our love for music too, because very much
Mhm.
when we were growing up, TV was all about either putting popular songs in shows or helping launch new bands. It's not really happening as much these days, just because of
No,
the way the industry has changed and the way music consumption has changed. But I feel like that used to be such a big part of life. Like, I remember being like 12 and needing to get the second One Tree Hill soundtrack to get Halo by Bethany Joy Letts. And like, it just doesn't happen as often now.
No, they don't. I remember vividly, you'd watch your teen drama, and then at the end, they'd have like the cover art for the single or for the album at the end of the episode, and they would tell you the artist and the song and where you could get it,
Oh,
and that's what you would wait for at the end.
I loved it. ABC Family did that. I think the CW did that.
Mm.
We're mentioning the CW. She's got her mention in. I remember at one point, MTV2 used to have just like a bumper at the bottom, like
Oh,
during
that
the
would tell you.
hills.
Hmm.
Yeah, like whenever a song played, it'd be like artist, album, song. And
I don't know why we don't do it anymore. I feel
I
like,
know.
funnily enough, Fire Country is doing it in terms of like there's country artists that they're tying to these reruns that they're showing on CBS. Like I feel like every week I'm seeing some type of advertisement for an up and coming country artist who's being
Ooh.
spotlighted by Fire Country. They're not on until February 16th, but they're milking these reruns by letting people know like so and so is going to be doing a live performance after this episode of Fire Country.
Do they ever have anybody like in the show performing?
So Billy, I'm sorry, I don't remember your last name.
Burke?
Thank you. But he he played actually a
Oh,
song
cool.
in the show. They had Kane Brown, but Kane Brown did not sing in his Fire
Oh,
Country episode, which was interesting.
interesting.
But I feel
Yeah.
like for season two, since they keep highlighting these artists, we will actually see them perform. I mean, the town has a bar that has a stage, and that's where Billy Burke's character Leone was playing. So I figure they probably will start doing
Yeah.
that.
I mean, that was the big part of teen dramas is to having a
Mhm.
location where you can just randomly get like, why was Jimmy Eat World in Tree Hill, North Carolina? Like it doesn't make sense, but it was great that they had a venue that they could just put in the OC too. In 90210, they had random people come to the beach club. Like, why was Rita Ora at the Beverly Hills Beach Club?
No one knows. But see what you're talking about though is reminding me of Charms Bar. But I can't remember if they had actual bands playing or if we were that they actually announced who was playing or if they were local musicians who we didn't get the name of.
Hmm. I think Buffy did that too because they had the in the 90s and 2000s, the teens were clubbing at age
Mhm.
appropriate clubs. In Buffy, they went to the Bronze. There would always be people playing at that place. And that show wasn't even about the music.
And it felt necessary to the plot a lot of the times. Now I feel like when you hear songs in shows, particularly in teen dramas, we're front loading in the first few episodes the hits, a few deep
Yeah.
cuts, and then they start sprinkling in. And sometimes it matches up to the scene in a significant way, but the majority of time, not so much.
Yeah. The Summer I Turned Pretty is really doing the heavy lifting and bringing back the soundtrack.
Mm.
I see what you're saying. There's some shows on like Netflix where like the first few episodes you're like, "Oh, I love this song." And then by like episode 8 you're like, "I've never heard this song in my life." Like what lo royalty-free song is this? But like The Summer I Turned Pretty is just like banger after banger. And you're right, sometimes the song matches the vibe and sometimes it's just like so we wanted this song in the episode. And I can't hate that. Like I would do that too if I was creating a show. I'd be like, "We're getting this Katy Perry song in, whether you like it or not." I don't care if it fits the scene.
It's just going to be blasting from somebody's phone.
Yeah, why not? I remember
Oh.
when I was a teenager and I thought that I could be a screenwriter and I would like write songs into the episodes of my quote show. And I told my brother once, I was like, oh, and in this one scene, she's going to be singing a Matchbox 20 song in her dorm room. And he was like, what's the importance of that? And I was like, there is no importance. I just want her to like Matchbox 20 because I like Matchbox 20. It just like had no point in the plot, but it was fun.
Well, it is new. Then you can seed it for like maybe at the end of the season, Matchbox Punch comes to the college.
Right? I mean, the vision was there.
Yes, especially when you were writing, because then it actually would have been possible. There are a lot of shows now. There's no random band that's coming to the show for whatever odd reason. Like, I don't know, the tour bus ran out of gas, or like there's a layover in this small town, and they just have to be here for the next 24 hours, and they're gonna run around with the cast. Like, we don't do that anymore on TV.
We need to bring her back.
We do, especially in this age in which like promoting is really hard outside of social media.
Yeah, we can't rely on TikTok forever.
No, especially because not all of us are on TikTok. Me
Yeah.
being one of the
Ooh,
people who's not.
yeah. Say it.
But I think I feel like network TV needs to get back into it because they were the tastemakers in terms of some dramatic moment happened and it's
Hmm.
set to this song and this is the song that you're going to be playing for the next month because you're emotionally tied to it now and there's fan videos all over the place with the song on it. They
Yeah.
don't do that too much anymore. So I just don't I feel like we need to get
It's
back to it.
been almost 20 years, and think that people still associate chasing cars by Snow Patrol and How to Save a Life by the Fray with Grey's Anatomy because that was one of the best syncs, I think, in the history of television. Like, it just doesn't get better than those two. Like, it's so emblematic of that show, that time period,
Mhm.
and you just don't hear that anymore. And I think too, the OC had some of the best. Like, you can't hear some of these songs and not think of like, oh, that was the song. One of our coworkers was just mentioning the season two finale of the OC
Mhm.
when Marissa shoots Ryan's brother and that I think it's Imogen Heap song is playing. Like, you can't not think of that.
Which song is it? Hide and seek? Because
It's
I can't remember
the
it.
I don't know what it's called. It's the one that Jason Derulo made, the What You Say.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know what it's called though.
I don't remember what it's called. I feel like, as soon as it starts playing, the title of the song would jump right to the forefront of the brain. But
Yeah,
when
I
it's
don't know
not
what it's
playing, you're trying to
called.
think.
I don't know.
For me, though, it's A Drop in the Ocean by Ron Pope from The Vampire Diaries with the call between Steph and
See,
Elena.
yeah, I haven't gotten through the Vampire Diaries, so the music, I know that was a big one for music.
Mhm.
And I don't know the references yet.
Okay, let me see if since you were talking about the OC, do you remember Dice? I think it's by Damien
Yes.
Rice. That
Yeah.
run through the party to get to Marissa,
Iconic.
very iconic. When I had done my rewatch of the OC one time, literally that's all I was listening to was Dice. It's just because
So
it's
good.
just right in the ear. It's such a good song. I can't think of songs though right now for modern television that's on that's actually broadcasting that I can remember a song from last year.
I mean, maybe Stranger Things with the running up that hill, but that's like not, it
It's still
wasn't new.
streaming. The,
Yeah.
though, what was they were wearing out that Need a Hero song because it showed up in three different streaming shows and one of them was Loki, I believe.
Hmm.
So I mean everyone does have a lot of similar tastes. I just would like to, I don't feel connected to a moment more. I mean, I guess things to the latest episode of Percy Jackson, which by the way, if you haven't seen episode 5, mute me for like a minute or so because you'll want to be fresh for this needle drop. But they played Hadaway's "What Is Love" in the tunnel,
Oh my
and
gosh.
I got the biggest smile while watching. And Reed, I just realized I think I spoiled that for you. My
It's
bad.
fine. It's fine. I love a spoiler. It makes me more excited to watch it.
Oh, well, it's such a great needle drop. It's my favorite needle drop so far that they've done because the series so far, I think there's one song in each episode except for episode 4. There isn't a song that they did. But each of the songs seems to like do some storytelling of its own. Like I
Mhm.
love the inclusion of Logical by Olivia Rodrigo in the
Yeah, that one
premiere.
was tucked in to the first episode. Like if you didn't know it, you wouldn't have heard it.
And but I loved it though because it felt like it really did match Sally.
Hmm.
Um,
I'm still
I
confused why she was on that balcony in the rain, but that's not the point of this podcast. We'll talk about that offline.
okay. I think it was for the drama of it though, but yes, we will talk about it off pod. I think what else did they have? That Arthur's theme, which I had never heard that song before, but it is from the movie Arthur, and that felt like it connected to Percy in the sense that like they want him to be one way, and he just cannot be like the gods who backstab and betray one another and manipulate, and he just really wants to be his own person, and he continues to be his own person. But I think right now that's the only show I could think of where I feel like I'm attached to the music. But that also might be because they literally aren't wearing me out with 5 different songs in an episode. It's one per episode.
Hmm. Yeah. although I don't know. I like a lot of music.
I do too, but I feel like in some shows it doesn't need it. Like sometimes it just feels like they had a budget and they wanted to spend it.
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know if you ever watched The Hills on MTV,
Hmm.
but um in every like at the end of every scene and introducing another one, they do like the B-roll of like Los Angeles and be a song playing for like 3 seconds to like move us forward to the next song. It would be every single scene. So like by the end of the episode, there's like 10 songs from the episode in a 22-minute episode. I think for a while we were dealing with the hillsification of music syncs on TV, which was it was a time. It's definitely an era.
It was, but and it launched careers. So I don't want to be like, I don't want to poo-poo it. Like it did help people get recognition outside of their local areas, which, okay, I feel like this is a time to talk about the ways in which for certain generations, there was such a thing as you wouldn't hear a song if you weren't from a certain region. And
This is
now that's
true.
not necessarily the case because of the streaming sites. You don't have to be in the South or the Northeast or wherever somebody is popping to actually have heard of them.
Yeah, there definitely were regional hits because one of my best friends is from New York, and like there's a lot of overlap in our taste because we grew up at the same time. We like saw a lot of the same artists, but she'll like bring up some like random house song, and she'll be like, "Oh, they played this on the radio all the time when we were kids." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" But I guess in New York, the radio station just had a bigger reach. They played different songs, whereas like when you get a little bit more regional, it caters to a different audience. Even if it's a top 40 station, there's some songs they just don't play because they don't connect with a certain area. That's a
Mhm.
bummer, but it's often a popularity contest and still is.
It is, but like at least then I feel like it might have been a little bit easier for local artists to get spins. Now it's about dropping things on like platforms in which everybody music platforms where everyone could hear them. But before, they would be going to the stations trying to get their record played.
Yeah, it's weird because I feel like radio defined the hit, but it now feels like radio is catching up with the hits.
Hmm.
Like you don't really hear a song on radio unless it has like a significant amount of streams or if it's popular on TikTok.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like backwards, whereas like radio really was the be all end all at a certain time. You had to be on the radio to be heard to have a hit. And now it's like radio is like, oh, that one's popular. Let's put it on. So that I feel like there's delayed hits too, where it's like we've been hearing this song for a month and radio's just now catching up.
Hmm. And you
And a
feel
lot of people
like
probably don't even listen to the radio anymore.
I'm guilty of that. Like I
I put it on
really,
when I like, let's be honest, sometimes Bluetooth just doesn't work and my phone
yes.
just does not want to play Spotify in the car. So like I will toggle through like 6 radio stations and try to find songs that I want to listen to.
I feel you. Because then it's just like, what station can I find that's local that I would be fine listening to? Like, obviously, there are going to be things I want to skip, but you can't do that with radio. So, what would I still slightly enjoy if I didn't
Mm.
have the possibility to just, especially if there's only like six radio stations that I like listening to.
Yeah,
Like,
Sabrina, this is going to be tragic to you when I
oh
relay
no.
this news. There was a radio station in my city that played like alternative and rock,
Hmm.
like Paramore, like that kind of stuff, like stuff that's not on top 40. It was like the alt girls and bands. I'm still not over it. They changed the station and it's like not on FM anymore.
Oh.
Yeah, they were like, we're moving to this. I don't even know how to find it on the radio anymore. And either like you can listen online. I'm like, one, I'm not gonna do that. Sorry. I love you guys so much, but I'll just put Spotify on. And like I used to that song, that station used to play nothing but bangers. And
Why
it
did
was
they do that
always
to them?
I don't know. Like I can't, it's not on anymore. And it's so it's horrible.
It
We have
sounds
like 8
horrible.
million, we have two adult alternative or adult contemporary stations and like three um top 40, but that alt station was like my heart. We did just recently get an R&B station, which is
Oh. They
I love
late,
it.
but it's okay.
Yeah, they closed the one of the top 40 stations and turned it into um R&B. And B. And sometimes
Mm,
you get those good 90s hits on there.
nice.
So I'll take that, but like I miss my alt station.
You would. I mean, like, it's one, it's alternative music, which has a bigger range than people think. And like two,
Yeah.
just they tend to have bangers. As but you mentioning the R&B station though reminded me of, do you remember, let's see, mid to late 2000s when the top 40 started mixing with the hip hop and R&B station?
Yes.
Like, I feel like the first time I actually truly paid attention to that, outside of the R&B girlies getting like on top 40 just because, they have a better time crossing over, was when they wouldn't let a Millie go. Like
Oh, true.
it felt played every hour, if not every 30 minutes, because that was a that was like the song. And I remember the first time I was like, is that our top 40 station? Is that the pop station playing a Millie as best they can? Like just
Did your top 40 stations go through a phase where it was like all like it wasn't EDM yet. It was like that house like dance remixes.
no. So like when Cobra Starship and what Black Eyed Peas, when they were doing all that synth
Hmm.
music. That's when we started getting it. Like that was back during that era when all of the pop hits had to have some kind of like you said, the EDM dance uh mix in it. But it wasn't
Hmm.
actually the EDM artists themselves. Like I can't really think of one that was playing except for David Guetta that was playing
Hmm.
often that I remember by name. But yes, I do remember the way it sort of everything was for a
Hmm.
while there.
Yeah. I remember growing up too, there would be like Friday Night Dance Groove. And like after a certain time, the top 40 just turned into like a club. And it's like you're 6 years old in the back seat driving home from your brother's baseball game. And it's just, I can't think of any of the songs right now, but it was just like the strangest. It's just so strange that it just like, who's dancing in their car? But whatever, go off.
I mean, see, I would listen to that when I was being driven by my parents, especially my dad. It would be the Quiet Storm. Like I would just be listening to smooth jazz in the
Oh,
back
smooth
seat.
jazz. We had a smooth jazz station too that closed.
Oh,
The worst. Yeah.
I mean but that like provokes memories of like road trips for me. Like, so I'm always when I hear that, I'm like, oh, that sounds nice. But after like 5 minutes, I have to get the headphones out because that's just not my
Hmm.
music. Because I remember it's dark, we're driving through whatever state, and they've been listening to the Quiet Storm for the longest time.
Sometimes like, you get restless
Yeah.
because I used to play that like, along with lo-fi beats. I'd put smooth jazz on or like some sort of like jazz with lo-fi beats mixed in to write with. And sometimes I'd be like, okay, I can't. Silence is better. Like it was a vibe for a little bit, but now I'm just like feeling antsy for some reason.
Hmm. I feel you. Though I think so. Oh, I forget what I was going to say. Oh, but when you're little, you take on your parents' tastes.
Hmm.
So when you're little, you're listening to your parents' music, and it was a lot of Quiet Storm and hip hop and oldies, like the songs you play at the cookout too. Like there's just
Hmm.
something about the wonderfulness of hearing like Stevie Wonder or the Temptations or the Four Tops, Supremes. Like it's just fun.
Hmm.
It takes me back to my youth, running around in the summer with my cousins.
Hmm.
And I listen to those songs still now, but I feel like the songs that you listen to when you're younger are the songs that feel the most like home.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I got my music taste, I think, from my family too. My mom wasn't as like big into music. Like she'd find a song that she liked and like it'd be her jam for like 2 years until she found another one. But growing up, she loved when I was growing up, she loved Janet Jackson. She had the Velvet Rope. My dad loved he was like big into like 70s rock because that
Mhm.
was when he was in college, I think. Um, but a lot of my music taste comes from my older brother. He, both my brothers are older. Um, but he loved like R&B. So like that's where I get my love for R&B. Like he'd watch
Mm,
106 in Park, he'd download all the songs, watch all the videos. And like that's I have a lot of nostalgia for like 90s R&B with like Next and Jagged Edge,
mhm,
all those groups. Um, but then there's a whole other aspect of my taste that is just completely my own because like nobody got me into Britney Spears, you know?
mm,
Like I was
mm.
young enough but old enough to still remember how it felt hearing Baby One More Time for the first time and just like it was like there's always I think there's an artist where it's just love at first sight.
True.
And for me being that young and seeing Britney it was like, "Oh, we're in this for the long haul." And I never left.
Those memories are so great. I feel like for me, I had my earliest memories are actually of Michael Jackson. Because it's funny because y'all know this. I have two dads and they have disparate tastes. So, um, one really it has eclectic taste. I believe I get my rock music and like influences with funk and soul and everything from him. And then my other dad, he's very much in the hip hop lane and he likes jazz and like I would steal his CDs because he would always have like the Mariah Carey ones too. So like I
Mariah.
would like, I'm taking your CD. And he'd be like, "You're what?" I was like, "I'm taking it. You're not recording with it right now. I'm taking it." And I would like play like music blocks. But my mom, she's more of like whatever is a radio hit, that's what she enjoys. She's not like a big
Hmm.
music person, but when she really loves someone like Whitney Houston, she really loves them. But like for me, at 3 years old, vividly, I remember my Michael Jackson tape that my dad with the eclectic taste recorded for me. And I wore it out, Reed. There was a there was a section because he had recorded all the concerts that had aired on TV and including the music videos. And there's a blue spot in the tape from my favorite section.
Oh
Um,
no.
and you couldn't fix that. So like I remember I was so heartbroken when it turned blue and I wanted him to fix it and he couldn't fix it. He had promised that he'd make me a tape, but of course that never actually ends up happening because you can't do that. Those were that was the single tape. But I always like would fast forward through the blue section sad until we got to was it another concert or was it I want to feel like it was Beat It that came next. I can't remember. But that was like my artist. And it's so funny to me that like at 3, that was Michael was it for me. But by the time I got to my teen years, it very much was Paramore and Fall Out Boy and My Chemical Romance. I remember when the video, I believe for teenagers dropped, because my friend at the time he had came because he was picking up his siblings, but my mom ran a daycare at the time. And we had turned MTV on and they were dropping the video and all you could hear was us jumping up and down and singing the song. They were like, "Y'all getting there?" We're like, "Yeah, you definitely
That's
are."
one of my I think looking back one of my biggest like music regrets was um in middle school when the like pop punk it felt like a renaissance or like it was just at the height of its popularity when we were in at least when I was in like middle school it was when it was really popular like Fall Out Boy and My Chemical Romance all of them I it just felt like I didn't feel I don't know how to describe this. I acted like I hated it just because it was
Mm,
always on the radio. It was popular. It's what every there were when you're a kid. Okay, try to my brain is going so fast. When you're a kid, there are people, peers who you might not like, stay with me, um, either because they are mean or you see their behaviors and you're like, I'm not connecting to that. There's just people that you don't get on with, you know what I mean?
mhm.
And sometimes when you learn what they like, you're like, I can't.
I
So
get
like
it.
there were people I think growing up that um, I just did not gel with for some reasons. And if they liked a certain song, I'm like, "Ugh, nope, not doing sugar, we're going down. But decades removed from that, I have an appreciation for that music And maybe it is just like being removed from that time period. It doesn't, you don't associate that music with those people or that frame of mind. Because, I think we've all seen the movie Eighth Grade or have heard of it. Being a tween is an interesting experience, and
Difficult.
you have a lot of emotions. And if you're a certain kind of kid, sensory details really impact like your memories and how you feel. So like I couldn't listen to music that I didn't like or like I don't just some things like you find out some kid likes this movie and you're like not watching that movie. Um so I feel like I made a point and then I lost my train of thought, but I I think I got my point across.
You did so like there are two different types of experiences, particularly in your preteen years, musically, that I feel like people go through. Either you're rejecting a certain type of music because of who in your school or in your life, your community is
Yeah,
listening
like a
to it.
negative association.
Yeah, or then see, I was on the other side of it where hip hop music and R&B music was the music that my peers were listening to in middle school. And I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it as much as them. But I found myself watching 106 in Park more than I probably would have been watching it because I wanted to feel more connected with my fellow sixth and seventh graders.
Hmm.
By the time though I hit eighth grade, I really was Paramore had taken over. So I'm sitting Fall Out Boy. So there was I remember sitting on the blacktop, like with headphones on in my Hot Topic hoodie. It was a Tinkerbell one that my mom got me for Christmas, and these black baggy pants. I was in dress code, but still trying to be as punk as possible. And just listening to my music. By that time I had abandoned my the South Pole and the baby fat for like baggier clothing because that was what I felt more comfortable in. I
You
feel
were
like
on trend. That was the big trend when we were teenagers.
and that had been briefly important to me. And then
See, do you look back on that and cringe, or are you like, yeah, that was me, and you're like, I don't want to say proud, but like you respect that version of yourself.
I respect her in the sense that like the fashion sense was on point, but I feel I was happy that by the time I got to like the latter part of eighth grade, I felt more comfortable wearing the fashions that I was actually interested in, rather
Hmm.
than what everybody else was wearing. I looked nice in both. So I was like, well, let me just wear what's more comfortable for me. Like there's nothing wrong with like homegirl and the baby fat. Like
Hmm.
she was rocking the outfit, but it wasn't exactly me. So I tried to like what's on trend and then like switch it up with what I actually wanted to wear.
Yeah, I asked that for two reasons. One is because when I was during that time in my life, I had no fashion sense. I didn't use it to express myself. I was just like, whatever's on the clearance rack at AirPods. Because that was where you shopped, at least in my town, is like Aeropostale, Hollister. Although there were trends that I just did not subscribe to. Like, do you remember those boat shoes, Sperry shoes? Were those big in your area?
Oh, I feel like boat shoes were, but I feel like they were Dockers for us.
It was Sperry's. I'm like, those they're not comfy. Why are we all wearing them? I didn't have any. I was always Vans and still am, but I feel like I didn't come into my own like fashion sense even after college. I didn't know. I was just putting things on, to wear clothes. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I didn't use it um as like a way to express myself until like adulthood, which I mean, you see me now. You didn't see me then. You see me wearing merch for my favorite artist, which is something that I didn't know I could do until I was in my 20s. And then the second reason I asked is because I feel like that's a big thing that musicians go through is they look back 10, 15 years removed and they're like, oh, that album was not me. That music I made was not me. That the clothes I was wearing, that was not me. And I feel like that happens so much to, I guess, maybe specifically people our age, where I don't know, I feel like we're conditioned to disavow the people we were before. And I mean, I get it. You look back and you're like, oh, what was I doing? What was that? Like it's not that serious, but you just like see things and you're like, why did I wear cargo shorts for so long? But I do have a big respect for the musicians that are able to carry every version of themselves into the future and be like, that was me. The music still hits. It may not be what I'm up to now, but like the fans love it. So I'm gonna respect it. I'm not gonna name names because I think if you're a fan, you know which way your favorite artist has leaned on that discourse. But I think it's an interesting thing that comes up with artists is like, I hated that song. And I'm like, what? Everyone's like, we love that song. What are you talking about? I think someone recently was like a song, one of their older songs started playing, and the artist was like, I don't play that song anymore. I hate it. And everyone on Twitter was like, what are you talking about? It's your biggest hit.
I do think that is always funny. I mean, I think we do because artists are just like us to like allow like grace for that. I think, but to me, it's so funny looking back at pictures of yourself when you're younger, when you're trying to figure out what works for you. And maybe the thing that you were wearing were on trend or they were quirky, but you enjoyed them. Like I love looking at pictures of when I was younger, especially during my wasn't exactly a scene kid, but I loved like a rockish element. So there was always something with guitars or skulls. Or I was particularly in black with a studded belt. Like it was a thing. She was a moment. I enjoyed her. I think she was pretty cool. And like I'm not there anymore, but I feel like it's just fun to see the evolution of yourself. And for artists, you get to see the evolution of yourself and your music, which I think that is so cool. Unless, of course, it was if they were an artist who had a certain sound that they then changed in order to get on. And so
Mhm.
that's why that period in time is a struggle for them because they felt like they weren't being themselves. It wasn't like they were making a more radio-friendly version of themselves. They were making a version that wasn't at all like them.
Yeah, and I guess I have to remember too that what I was just saying was like being in a certain time and associating certain music with certain events, like maybe performing that song happened during a time that they were not at their happiest or like something happened and it reminds them of that song. I'm gonna go easier on them after I just came to that realization. But it is sometimes disheartening to fans when an artist is like, "Oh, I hated that song. It was not me." And you're like, "What is that? I like it. What does that mean for me?"
I know. I feel like other than like it's just different tastes. Though I think for this reminding me of a thing that I did want to say, which is that fans have to let artists evolve. And sometimes
Yeah.
that means you get off the train. Like I really don't like when people if you liked a certain era, then you liked a certain era and you don't like this new era, that's fine. But I feel like to try to get an artist to be like they were maybe even 10 years ago just isn't the wave or the motion.
hmm And sometimes on the other side of that too, it can be toxic to demand an artist to constantly reinvent themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That is so unfair. And I think there's a Taylor Swift quote about it, which I'm not even going to try to paraphrase. Google it because it's really good about how women are expected to like change up their look, change up their sound, continue to reinvent themselves so no one gets bored. Um, I think they can get pigeonholed in that too because I mean, when a new artist releases a new song, it's like everyone's like, what is it going to sound like? Is it going to be completely different? And if it's not, it's like, oh, everything sounds the same, which I think that is a claim for a lot of artists. Here's a soapbox that we didn't talk about before we started recording, is when I feel like that's a criticism that is lobbed at so many, particularly women in the industry. It's like, oh, all her songs sound the same. And I'm like, do you only know the hits? Are you listening to the album? Are you hearing the deep cuts? Because you're incorrect. Just baseline, you're incorrect. And I will call one particular artist out. Not that, okay, let me talk through this. I'm like, my mind is racing again. Like I want to get on the soapbox. Pink, the artist Pink. Everyone
Hmm.
says all her songs sound the same. And I'm
They
like,
don't. Even the hits don't sound the same.
they don't. I'm like, what are you talking about? Did you, if you listen to her albums, even her albums don't all sound the same. Like one singular album, there's so many different sounds within that album. And I'm like, so tell me you only listen to the hits without telling me you only listen to the hits. Did I say
Yeah.
that correctly?
Yeah, you
I don't
did.
know. I just think it's so unfair to be like, all her music sounds the same. It's like you gotta do the research before you make those sweeping claims.
Well, that and because there is a particular way singles are dropped in the first place. I mean,
And it's marketing.
it's marketing, but I also feel like is it true that sometimes the singles they chose were the wrong ones when you listen to the album?
Yeah,
Yes,
sometimes
that's true. But I also think that if the first single that drops sounds a little bit like the previous one, that's on purpose.
they're bridging the gap.
They're bridging they're trying to get the people they know will buy to come listen to this song and then spread it for everything else. But also, just because the single tends to be a ballad every time doesn't mean the song sounds the same. It just means that we keep going forward with
Yeah,
the
or if
ballad.
it's upbeat and it's like, sure, she's put out another banger, but it's not the same. I don't know. It's confusing to me.
I get it. Well, especially because there's always going to be complaints. Like there's just, and
Always.
that can't be helped. For instance, like to talk about King B. She Renaissance is not for everybody. And I think that is one of the things that some people did not, negotiate well when it dropped. Because if you were not a fan of dance music, it was not going to be an album for you. And I feel like
Hmm.
that is okay. I feel like sometimes if you do have to get off the train for an album, this journey for this artist that you adore, then you have to get off the train. Maybe meet
Yeah.
them back for another album. Maybe it's just not for you.
Or maybe
Because
put the album, when a popular artist releases an album, there's inevitably discourse. People are sharing their opinions, their reviews, they're claiming songs, they're saying this one's a skip, they're saying, how do you like that one? They're saying this one's the best. Sometimes I like to maybe I'll listen to the album and if I'm kind of like tepid on it, like I'm like, I let it marinate for a little bit and I revisit it when the discourse has died down so I can hear it with fresh ears. That is like not my judgment isn't being clouded by what other people are saying.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just got to do that. Let something like sit for a sec. And I also think there's something to be said about living with music for a little bit before you give your final judgment, which is why sometimes with reviews, I'm like, okay, you listen to the album one time. Um, I don't know. I just like letting music become a part of my life to see how it then changes to me, the way I hear it, the way I listen to it. And that's not always a luxury we're gonna afford to every artist. It's something that will probably happen with your favorite artist. You'll like maybe on first listen, you're like, what the hell is this song? And then in like 4 months, you're like, I get it now. So you just gotta live with it for a little bit. Not that's not to say you have to force yourself to like the music that your favorite artist put out, but I think sometimes things take time. It takes an association, it takes a memory, it takes just hearing it at the right moment. There have been so many like not just with music too, but like there's like a TV show that you're like putting off. And then when you finally watch it, you're like, this was the time I was meant to watch this because it means more to me now than it would have 6 months ago when everyone was talking about it or like when it was popular. There have been so many of those moments where like I discover an artist who is, they have, I mean, most artists have like a lot of fans, but if there's an artist that I've been kind of like, I knew of, but like hadn't really engaged with their work, and then I come to them, I'm like, this was the moment that I was supposed to hear this music. Maybe that's a little too like spiritual and in the universe for some people, but I think it really is about the stars aligning sometimes, about with certain music. You have to hear it you're when you can let it in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like people understand that for books, but they seem to not understand that for music. Like sometimes you are not in a place particularly if you're in a sad place, perhaps you don't want to hear someone's entire upbeat album.
Yeah.
Or if you're in a really good place and especially if an artist has spoken about this widely, that the album is a body of work that is them working through something that happened to them, maybe it's not
Hmm.
the right time for you to listen to it. If we do that with books and we do that with television shows and we do that with movies, why wouldn't you be able to do that with music? Why wouldn't
Yeah.
you be able to just be like, you know what, I'm not in the right frame of mind to listen to this album, so I'm just going to park it. Like I'll meet you back in a month or two. Or I might
Yeah.
not meet you back for like a year or so. It really just depends.
Yeah. It really does depend.
And that's fine. I don't know if you've ever felt like this, but I always feel like everyone wants to weigh in so badly that either they force themselves to watch something or listen to something that they're just not ready to listen to, or they
Hmm.
do it and we haven't taken into account how we might personally feel about a genre or how we might personally feel about,
Yeah.
the songwriting. Because I feel like that when people say, oh, such and such album isn't good. And I'm like, is it that it's not good, or is it in a genre that you don't listen to, so you don't really know what the expectations of that genre is?
Yeah. I think it's important to take into account that something can be good, but also you just don't like it.
Hmm.
That's something I say all the time where like if I watch a show and I'm not a fan, but I can see that like, oh, it's good. It's a good show, but it's just not for me. Like I
Hmm.
think not to get on a pedestal, like that's I don't do that all the time. Like when I'm firing on all cylinders and trying to be a decent human being, like that's how I think and that's how I express my opinions. But sometimes you're like, oh, whatever, this sucks. But I tried to like take into account that, you know, creating art takes hard work and it's somebody put their heart and soul into something that I don't like to just write it off. Even if it's
Hmm.
an artist that I really don't like. And there are a fair share of those that I've expressed that I do not like certain artists for whatever reason. Recognizing like that's a good song, but like I just don't ever want to listen to it.
I feel you. I mean, I will not name names, but I feel like there are songs that pop off and you're like, this is this is really I can see why people are enjoying it, but I can also tell you I will not be listening to it myself personally ever
Mhm.
again. I think that that doesn't always need to be shared though. I feel like
No, I'm
it's
like, and to go back to your original point, like if you like hip hop and rap, maybe you shouldn't be reviewing a straightforward pop album.
if you're not a pop person, like if you just don't. Because I feel like there's some people that have eclectic tastes, and but I feel like if you exclusively listen to one genre, and the same like if you exclusively watch a certain type of television or movies, some things are not for you. So like if you are not a horror person, why are you reviewing the horror movie? If you are not
Mm,
a pop person, why are you reviewing the latest pop album? It's always going to be negative because it's a genre that you don't enjoy. And
mhm,
that would not necessarily be a problem if people were better at removing their personal selves from it and just going forward with like, according to my ear, this is what this album is doing, and this is what I like about it from an objective standpoint. But we don't often do that, so it ends up being subjective. So it's like, it's derivative. It like we so and so sounds just like the other artist on the radio, and it's like
ugh, I hate comparison too.
like, well, and then it's like that's not necessarily true. Like, pop actually hasn't been in this lane for a few years now, so the person is actually doing something different, even if they are referencing music from a previous era. Like, it's actually not the. Actually, I am going to say something. 1989 for when Taylor dropped her album, and I remember that, like, of course, if you were a Taylor Swift fan, you enjoyed it, but there were people being like, "Oh, but she's just doing what other pop people do," and I was like, "But she was a country artist."
Yeah.
So it's not the same thing. She's playing in a pool that she's never played in before. And honestly, it still did sound different from what other
Yeah,
people in
that's
the pop
that
lane
like
were
80s
doing.
synth stuff hadn't really hit yet. I feel like that was one of the first like
Hmm.
big bodies of work that brought that sound back.
But it was written off a bit
It was.
because oh, it's just a country artist doing a pop album. Like she shouldn't be here. And it's like, well, no, actually, for her to be from a different genre to be doing a straightforward pop album, it bangs. Like it
Hmm.
just really does. It's one of my favorite albums of hers. I also think Reputation took pop in a different direction.
It did. Oh my God. There's nothing like the first half of that album. The whole album is amazing. I love Taylor, but those mad as hell bangers, like
Hmm.
I did something bad. Like she's never done that kind of pop. Like that
Hmm.
is, in my opinion, such a standalone like sound and song that she's done in her catalog. Like nothing has ever sounded like I did something bad again. And even, oh my God, I remember when Look What You Made Me Do came out. Oh, it was just delicious. Everyone was like, "What is this?" Even my friend, not to call her out, but she is my fellow like Taylor obsessed person. We always know that a Taylor album is going to be really good when she first listens to it, and she's like, "I'm disappointed," because her initial reaction is always kind of like, "Ah," but then like in a week, she's like, "Okay, I'm obsessed," because it's like always like kind of jarring to hear like the new music. But when Look What You Made Me Do came out, I was giddy. I was laughing. I got the jokes in the song. Like I knew that she wasn't being serious. I knew we were in for an unserious like era of her where she was just going to be like rolling her eyes and like whatever. And she was like, I hate it. Then a week she was like, I got it. It's yeah, I'm with you now. Um, but I remember hearing that song for the first time and just being so giddy and just like, oh my God, she did it.
And it is so exciting when an artist enters into a new era and you know it's going to be big. I felt that way about Lemonade and when Formation dropped.
Hmm.
And it sounded like nothing I had ever heard her do. It was fun. Like it had a message and that yes, like I feel like every album is like, I've never heard Beyonce do this before. But like it's just there's just something about the change up in sound. And I think there needs to be more credit given for that, for artists who do decide to like experiment and change, especially for albums that do stand the test of time. I don't just mean lyrically, but like sound wise. Sometimes you can hear a sound we listened to an album from way back and like, ooh, we did the trendy sounds. And so the
Hmm.
production value now, like a few years later, just doesn't sound as good. It
Yeah.
sounds dated. And you might be like still grooving, but there's just something about it that's just like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes too, jumping off of that, there's some fans that hold a certain artist, there's an album or a song that they hold to be like the epitome of that artist.
Mm.
And if a new release does not match that or exceed that, it's like, why did they even try? And I think it can be so unfair. The comparison in pop music is, I think, one of, do I want to say this? It's toxic. It's the in those fandoms, it can be so it's the it's awful to witness and to see how it trickles to the artist. Where like this is a soapbox that I could talk about in its own episode. Katy Perry talking about her past two albums and how someone somewhere, the collective, decided Teenage Dream is what she needs to hit or exceed every time she releases an album. Forgetting that, okay, am I on this soapbox?
You are, but it's fine.
Cut me off if I go too far into the Katy Cat land. Forgetting that after Teenage Dream, she followed up with Prism, which had two number 1 hits on it that are two of her biggest hits, Roar and Dark Horse. And when she released Witness some in 2017, and suddenly became all about like, oh, it's not as good as Teenage Dream. And then when she released Smile, it's like, it's not as good as Teenage Dream. And it's like, why does it need to be?
So what's funny about that though is that the word teenage is literally in that title. It's almost as if she's not allowed to grow past young adulthood.
Yeah. They see her as the bubbly pop star with the dark hair, and her getting a blonde pixie cut was just like too much for some people. And I will never understand how the hair impacted the way people heard the music. I just
She's unfortunately always had to go through that. I feel like for those of us who really enjoyed Mannequin, and there was that one song from the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants that also played in One Tree Hill, which is escaping me,
my
but it's one of my favorite
favorite,
songs.
Simple is my
Simple.
favorite song of hers.
Like when she moved past that sound, there was an issue. When she moved past One of the Boys, there was an issue. When she moved past Teenage Dream, California Girls, there was an issue. I just feel like every time
Yeah.
she either expands her sound or just goes in a different direction, and still in the pop world, it becomes an issue. And it's not, it's tied to her music, it's tied to her image. Like when she kind of had the scene kid hair in a way, as far as like the black long hair slash bangs situation going on.
Yeah, she
And
was the Warped Tour girl in the beginning of her career.
yeah, and then when she changed from that style, um, she was called out as selling out, which she didn't. She just changed her sound. And
Yeah.
then I just feel like if there's an artist who keeps seeming to get into trouble for changing, it's Katie.
I know,
Like,
like what? I don't get it. Maybe I'm biased because like she's my like number one. But I don't know. I just sit back and I think it's so there's deeper, it's not just her, you know? Like it's the criticisms that I think are lobbied against her artistry, it goes deeper than just her. It's a lot of women in the industry that, why'd you
yeah,
do that? Why'd you do this? You have to be this person that we knew 15 years ago. It's just can be impossible, which, we learned about in the Barbie movie.
that America Ferrera speech is hits home. It's so real. Which is
Yeah.
why she should have been nominated for things this award season. Golden
Yeah.
Globes, where were you?
Yeah. Even the discourse around that speech, it's like, is anybody tired yet?
Well, because she even had to come out and be like, yes, I'm aware it's feminism 101, but some people need feminism 101. And which is the thing that confused me about some of the criticism around that speech, because if you already know what she's talking about, the speech isn't for you. So why are
Mhm.
you
Or it's
critiquing
just a
it?
friendly reminder. But that movie also was targeted to a younger audience,
Hmm.
and it resonates with all ages. I don't know.
I don't know. But to circle back to what you were saying about artists not really being able to evolve without there being, in some cases, backlash. I was thinking about like Paramore. Um, for some people, Riot, which isn't their debut, I think All We Know Is Falling is their debut, but Riot is their sophomore album, is the album that they're always judged against. And
Okay, so I wasn't really like I like Paramore. I'm not like a stan, but like I've constantly been like aware of them. Um, so when they got the huge hit with 10 years ago now for the self-titled album with Ain't It Fun, and then
mhm.
what was the other one that was a hit from that album?
Oh, it
Ain't
is
It Fun?
escaping.
Still Into You.
Yes. Mhm.
Did people take issue with that album? And then you, second question, the album I think after that, After Laughter, when they had that sound kind of got like poppier.
Mhm.
Did people take issue with that? Those two like switches.
So there's a thing about bands who grew up in like in the emo and pop punk lane that when they move out of it, they don't struggle. They tend to do well, but our fans who enjoyed them struggle, right? Like after it's more so with After Laughter, um, that people are like, oh, it like sounds poppy. Like, and I was like, well, they were a pop punk band. I mean, pop was going
Yeah,
to like it was gonna become a thing as they got
I'm
older.
sure the same thing happened with Panic at the Disco.
Well, see, Panic did pretty odd right after their debut.
I
So
love that
people
song on that album.
Not
Night
in
in
the
the Afternoon.
afternoon. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think people kind of just accepted that it was always going to sound different for them, but I don't think that really was the case for Paramore. I feel like everyone's like, well, this is great. It's still rockish, but why is it the next album it sounds less rock and less rock and stuff? It's like because the band's moving away from that sound. I just think I love Riot as an album and it aged really well. But I think people need to remember that the band was like 15, 16.
hmm Yeah.
Why would you want her and them really to sound like they did when they were like kids banging it out? Like
That
it's
is still
fun, but it's
like
still.
to I mean, we've talked a little bit about this too, but it goes back to like when people are like, "Oh, I wish they were making this music still." And it's like, well, that music still exists. You can still
Hmm.
listen to it. And I think that the double standard. I don't know if I'm using that correctly, but like even if they did continue any artist, I'm not just saying Paramore, but like if they continued to make the same music, then they'd be like, oh, they're always doing the same thing. So it's like you can't win either way.
No, you can't.
Like
And this is
if
why it's
Olivia
different
Rodrigo
too.
released her third album and it was still purple album cover and she was still doing her pop punk and her ballads, they'd be like, she doesn't change. And it's like, why does she have to?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like if she wanted to, she could, but if she doesn't, let the girl put a purple album cover out and keep doing what she wants to do. She's still young, she's still growing.
Yeah, well, and then so there are certain genres that just lend themselves to youth. And I
Yeah.
think pop punk is one of them. I feel like eventually there's only but so much like distance, like well, not distance, what am I thinking of? There's only so much growth you can have in certain genres just because of the way that
Yeah.
they're developed. Like it's like, well, when people are like, well, these famous rock bands sound the same. It's like, well, yeah, metal is a type of genre you can just grow in. Like
Hmm.
standard rock is a genre that you can just grow in. But usually the subgenres, I feel like there's not much room unless you start bringing in other elements. And sometimes people don't like when you bring in those other elements.
Hmm. And it's like there's a reason why all of the Disney Channel stars of our age, their first albums were all rock influenced. Miley Cyrus, Demi
Mhm.
Lovato, Selena Gomez and the Scene. Like those, all those first albums, Jonas Brothers, all of those were all very much like mid 2000s pop punk influence. And if you continue looking at their discography, they move further away from it. Maybe they come back to it like Demi and Miley have. I don't think the Jonas Brothers have, right? They're doing Sucker
No.
and Waffle House, all those
Yeah, it's
bops.
still very poppy, but just more like roadville pop.
But there's a reason why that's a there's an it's an entryway, I feel like,
Well, yeah.
into music.
Well, also because it's like one of the things that makes pop rock so good because it's like a child of punk. You don't really need a lot of skill to play. Obviously, if you can, like, I mean, the Paramore, like, they were just talented. But like, it's like, what did they say? Three chords and the truth.
Yeah.
Like, and then so and you don't really need to know a lot. It's a growing type of genre. While other genres you need to know, like even in pop, which people don't really understand, is that is all about structure. I feel like people like pop's so easy. Pop's actually very difficult. Pop's
Yeah.
very difficult. Not that, but it's popular music. Like, yes, but you need hooks. It needs to have,
Maybe a
it was catchy,
bridge.
a bridge. And at the end of the day, you also have to have like an it factor.
Yeah.
It's very much about image too.
Yep. Yeah. Because there are some songs that are meant for other artists that other artists get them and they become a hit. And you're like, what would have happened if that artist got it? And it's like, well, obviously it found the correct person to be the vessel for that song.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's a big thinker
It
in
is.
pop music. And I think
Mhm.
I remember writing something like 10 years ago about like in defense of pop music because it was getting written off so much in that like Katie Gaga heyday in
Mhm.
2013. And I'm like, I don't understand why it gets written off when it takes talent. Like you can't just some rando can't put out a pop album and get number one hits. Like you gotta have something. You know what I mean? It's not just the
Mhm.
song. And at the end of the day, it's not just fluff. It can mean something to somebody,
True.
even if it's not a piano ballad or it's not about something deep. Like there's a song, there can be just some random, not a random pop song. I don't want to sound like I'm writing anything off, but like something that someone might just be like, oh, it's just, fluffy pop song. And it's like, but that can mean something to somebody. It can be there for them. I have a vivid memory of my freshman year of college driving home after class like the first week, and I wasn't a very experienced driver at the time. Like I had to take the interstate to get to my college, and I hadn't really done that much. Um, and I remember there was one on ramp that just really gave me so much anxiety to get on and like just to turn into and to get on the interstate. It just and my heart would beat, and I'd be like, oh, this is so much. And I would always put a certain Britney song on when I was doing that. And I'd be like, okay, come on, Britney. Like I just needed her essence in the room to like get me through that. And like it wasn't any of her like deeper songs. I think it was Till the World Ends.
which is fun.
It's a fun song. And like I just needed her to pump me up. And like I still hold that memory of like that's an important moment, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So for people to write off certain artists or certain genres of music, I'm like, maybe we should all just like let people like things.
Yes. Same with like let people like country if they like country.
True. I had to age into that because listen, I didn't get country. Sometimes I still don't, but I'm like, you're not hurting anybody. Listen to your country. It's fine. I found country that I like. Look, growth. You know what I mean?
I know, because but I feel that way though. I feel like there's just a lot of, especially when you're in maybe a friend group or just in an area in which they listen to a specific genre, and then if you don't listen to that genre, it becomes an issue. And it's like
Yeah.
just let people like what they like. I mean, if
I've
they
even
love a banjo,
liked,
let them. I love a
yeah, I've
banjo.
liked songs outside of like my taste because it reminds me of a friend or like
Hmm.
I might have hated that artist or song going into it, but we were together having fun. They played it, and then I look back on that memory and I'm like, maybe I don't. Like, it's a big thing. Association, sensory details. Like, I don't have a specific example. I wish I had one, but like, there are certain like songs where I'm like, I thought I hated that, but it reminds me of somebody that I really care about.
That's nice. I feel like so you're when you play for a song for your friends and you're like they're like I'm gonna let you have that one. Like I
Hmm.
sometimes I love playing songs that I feel like they wouldn't like. But but like because I mean I speaking of vivid memories, I remember me and my friend went to go see a movie and she was asking me what I'd been listening to lately. I was like, oh, let me play it for you. Reed, I had her up in the car listening to Fiddle Get Down. Like
What
she
song?
I don't remember which song it was. But it was a song I was really obsessed with, and it was a bluegrass song. And so it's just us in the movie theater parking lot. The banjo's just a going, and so is the fiddle. And I am like having the time of my life, and she's just looking
She's
at
she's
me.
like, love that for you.
Yes. And we made it through a minute. Like, would you like me to turn it off? She's like, you can finish it if you want to. I'm just gonna be over here watching you enjoy it. I was like, no, we can stop. She laughed. But it's great sometimes just to be able to share like music with your friends. Or she played me it was a Cardi B song and it was off the debut album. Oh, why is it I could hear it playing in my head, but I can't remember the name of it.
I'm
Um
unfamiliar with most of her music.
oh, I wish I remembered it, but it as soon as the horns went off, I was dancing in my seat. She was like cackling as we were going down the road because I was getting my entire life to it. And there's just something about how communal music can be,
It
how fun it can
is.
be.
And my friends and I really took advantage of that. Starting in high school, we'd make each other mix CDs just because we knew each other's taste and like, oh, you would like this song, or like you might this might be outside your taste, but I feel like you'd like it. Like trying to like you just share. It's like Pokemon cards. Like you exchange music. I remember one really fun day. Um, I used to have this CD case because back in the day, I'm talking just 10 years ago, cars used to come with CD ports and you could put a CD in your car and listen to it. And that's what I did before, aux cords and Bluetooth. I would put CDs in my car. And I had a hamburger case that my friend got me. It was a big hamburger, and you could open it and it had CDs in it. And I remember we all just went to my friend's house. We all had our laptops out. We put something music on the TV, and we just like were swapping CDs to put on each other's computers so that we could like have them. And it was such a fun day that would not happen currently.
No.
And even CDs, like now you could just make a playlist and send a link to your friend. But I mean, we could have done that 10 years ago. But I have a long distance best friend. And for the first few years that she lived further away, we would mail CDs back and forth to each other. And it was just a fun way to be connected and like to, even though you don't see them all the time or don't talk to them all the time, to hear what they're listening to, like what's bringing them joy, I think is really a fun way to not only get to know somebody, But to just, I don't know, it's connecting. It's a
Hmm.
connective tissue in a lot of relationships. And there's so many playlists that I've made that feel so deeply personal to me, where it's like I have a playlist that's just like all of the songs that I listened to in college. And that was a time where I just told the story. Like I really turned to music to get me through a lot of like anxiety and strange moments. And it feels like if I ever shared that with somebody, it would be like opening up my diary. Didn't write a
Hmm.
single word, but like there are so many songs on there that just like are connected to moments and memories and feelings that it's like it feels so vulnerable sometimes to share the music you like. And that's why too, like when sharing songs on your Instagram story became like the thing, and everyone was like, no one cares what you share the music you share on your Instagram story. And I'm like, I do. I want to know what you're listening to. I want to discover new artists. I want to know like what songs are making your life right now. Like I want to know. It's like to me, it is a diary, like songs
Hmm.
and music. I like cataloging. I don't make as many like I used to make a playlist every month, Sabrina.
Oh, wow. The
And it would have like
dedication.
yeah, it would have like 30 songs on it, whatever I was listening to, the new stuff, like older stuff, like whatever was going on. And now maybe it's like quarterly. I make a playlist or like seasonally.
I think it's just still making them though.
Yeah, it's harder when you're older.
It is the time. Like, 'cause I feel like it's still your heart, right? But I don't think I felt the way that I had when I was a teenager, where it really did feel like if you burned a CD for somebody, that you were really hoping that they liked the album. Or if you
Mhm.
made a mixtape for somebody that they really enjoyed it. I would listen to my friend was into like metal and I really wasn't, but he like burned me to CDs and I was like, I don't think it's for me, but like, you know, when I'm angry and I'm playing it, like that yelling, it really works for me. Like I
Yeah.
understand it.
And you
Um,
get to know them.
you do, and I actually made a Gatsby mixtape for a English class because it was an option. It was the alternative. Um, it was the alternative option. I think you could like do a presentation, or you could make a mixtape.
Oh, 1000% is that's what I would do.
Yeah, and I was like, I had Belle Biv DeVoe on there. Like Poison was on there. I think it was for Daisy. Like it was like and there was something else, but I was like my heart was in it. I was like, I hope my English teacher likes it because I know he likes music. I got an A for it, but I was like, I hope he really enjoys it.
Yeah. I mean, just last year, I made my own soundtrack for Red, White, and Royal Blue. Well, not even the movie, the book.
Mhm.
Because it was just so like theatrical and vivid that I couldn't help but hear certain songs when I was reading that book. It's a form of expression. We really
It
got
is.
deep in this discussion of music.
We did. I feel like though if we don't stop, we'll be here for
We'll
like
be
two
here all
hours.
day.
Yeah. So like guys, this is it for this music pod. I'm sure we'll do one again, this time with
With
Michael.
Michael, yeah.
Yeah. And let us know like what you're listening to, what your favorite music is, like what's formative for you. We'd love to know the artists and the bands that shaped who you are.
Yeah, just give us a playlist
Ooh,
as
yes.
lovers of playlists.
But thank you for listening and watching you guys. Way to CW Spiral. I'm Sabrina.
And I'm Reed.
Bye.